My project is entitled The Student-Athlete Conundrum. I'm going to move kind of quickly, so try to keep up. What is a student-athlete? I define a student-athlete as a student that plays sports, but legally a student-athlete means an individual who engages in, is eligible to engage in, or may be eligible in the future to engage in any intercollegiate sport. An individual who is permanently ineligible to participate in a particular intercollegiate sport is not a student-athlete for purposes of that sport. And they're generally controlled by college athletic organizations such as the NCAA and 5 others, which I will get to in a bit. So what is the NCAA? The NCAA is a non-profit association that regulates athletes of 1,281 institutions, conferences, and individuals, and in 2014, they made nearly $1 billion in revenue. The other 5 college athletic organizations in the United States are the NAIA, the NJCAA, the NCCAA, the USCAA, and the NWAC. They manage 507 athletic programs throughout the U.S. combined. That's not all. The NCAA is in charge of schools that are consistent athletic juggernauts like Alabama, Duke, and Florida, while the NAIA, for instance, has teams like the University of Jamestown, Louisiana State University in Shreveport, and Savannah College of Art and Design. I don't know about you, but I haven't ever been excited to watch the University of Jamestown Jimmies compete with the Savannah College of Art and Design Bees. One very angry editor on Wikipedia described the NCAA as a money-seeking dictatorship that imprisons athletes of 1,281 institutions, conferences, organizations, and individuals. Now does this angry guy have a point? So I'm going to play a game called Spot the Difference. The one on the left is Kyrie Irving. The one on the right is also Kyrie Irving. Can you spot the difference between these two pictures? If you said that the one on the right is worth $18 million more than the one on the left, you would be right, and I would be pretty impressed. Well, that and the extra facial hair and uniform are different, but we won't get into that. You might think the one on the left had a long, illustrious career at Duke before turning pro. Well, you'd be pretty wrong. He played 11 games at Duke before becoming the number 1 overall pick for the Cleveland Cavaliers. 11 games separated Kyrie Irving from millions of dollars. He, like many others, was one and done. The one and done rule was implemented in 2006 as part of the collective bargaining agreement, and it prohibits players from entering the NBA draft until they're 1 year removed from high school and at least 19 years old. This is a rule that is entirely unique to college basketball and their players, and the one-and-done players are completely unique to college basketball in itself. Other professional basketball players that were one-and-done include Kevin Durant, Derrick Rose, Blake Griffin, John Wall, Anthony Davis. Every single one of these players was the first pick in their respective drafts from 2007 to 2012, aside from Kevin Durant, who was picked number 2 behind Greg Oden in 2007. Are you telling me that the 1 year of college truly made the difference between them becoming superstars or not? Now, the whole one-and-done phenomenon is partially thanks to Spencer Haywood. Spencer Haywood signed with the Denver Rockets of the ABA, the NBA's rival at the time, in 1969 after his second year in college and was named Rookie of the Year and MVP of the league. He then left the Rockets and signed with the Seattle Supersonics of the NBA. This wasn't allowed by the NBA's rules because you used to have to be 4 years removed from high school to join the NBA, and he was only 3 years removed. The NBA threatened to disallow the contract and place sanctions on the Supersonics. This led Haywood to file an antitrust action suit against the NBA. The central issue was whether the NBA draft policy was a restraint on trade and therefore illegal according to the Sherman Act. The United States District Court for the Central District of California issued an injunction in Haywood's favor, allowing him to sign with whoever he pleased. Eventually, it got to the Supreme Court, which ruled 7-2 against the NBA in 1971, which opened the door for players to be drafted by an NBA team following his graduation from high school. And the Kentucky Wildcats thank him. So, why don't the athletes stay in college for the free education? The NCPA and Drexel University Department of Sports Management conducted a joint study examining football and basketball teams in the FBS. What did they find? The average scholarship shortfall, also known as out-of-pocket expenses, for each full scholarship athlete was approximately $3,222 per player during the 2010-2011 school year. The room and board provisions in a full scholarship leave 85% of players living on campus and 86% living off campus below the poverty line. The fair market value of the average FBS football and basketball players, respectively, were $121,048 and $265,027. Basketball players with the top 10 highest estimated fair market values are worth between $620,000 and $1 million. 80% of these players received scholarships that left them living below the federal poverty line with an average shortfall of $3,098. Their coaches were paid $2.5 million on average before bonuses. All this means that every NCAA player was paid a combined $0.00 for the services this past year. Now you tell me, would you stay? Just like the NBA in the past, they're violating the Sherman Act. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was passed with the intent of preserving a competitive business environment. One way of achieving that was by disallowing price fixing or wage fixing. It is still in effect today and has a great implications on the salary of employees. The NCAA has a no pay rule for student athletes, which would appear to violate the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 because it ruins the quality of college sports by on-field product, as well as harms the market for student athletes. Furthermore, a case between Division I coaches and the NCAA also applies to the student athletes. Before 1998, to reduce the athletic costs without disturbing the competitive balance among member institutions, the NCAA had adopted a rule that limited the number of coaches in Division I sports and required the designation of certain coaches as restricted earning coaches with a salary cap. The 10th Circuit held that the NCAA's attempts to cap assistant coaches' salaries were illegal because it depressed coaches' compensation without promoting any legitimate antitrust goal. To summarize the case, the NCAA failed to prove that the salary restrictions enhanced competition, leveled an uneven playing field, or reduced coaching inequities, and failed to show that all of these goals could not be achieved in a different way. Basically, the NCAA lost the case, meaning that there weren't any restrictions on salary for assistant coaches, nor the number of coaches allowed to be hired. This wouldn't really matter in relation to student athletes since they aren't considered employees. But the Chicago District of the National Labor Relations Board ruled that football players qualify as employees, can unionize and have the right to bargain collectively if they're at Northwestern and have a scholarship. Although it applies only to scholarship football players at Northwestern, the precedent could extend to other Division I scholarship football players at similar private universities. Therefore, if the Northwestern ruling holds up, it would make it illegal for the NCAA to continue paying the players nothing at private schools because it would fix their wages, violating the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 and falling into accordance with the law versus NCAA ruling. This would eventually bleed into public universities, and before you know it, Division I football players are getting paid. All it takes is that first domino before college athletes are paid across the board. So this leads to the question, how could the NCAA pay these players? Now, one way is to allow schools to not set a limit on how much financial aid a player could receive. This means that the market would dictate where players go. However, this would pose some problems for smaller schools trying to recruit better players and would cause a disparity. The better way, I think, is to allow players to get paid. Through endorsements and autograph signings. School wouldn't have to pay a dime, and the most deserving players would get paid. This means that the NCAA only has to relieve a couple guidelines or rules with student athletes, and then all of the great athletes would get paid, and this wouldn't be an issue anymore. So my conclusion is that the players are going to start getting paid eventually. The topic is becoming more and more talked about, with more and more cases piling up against the NCAA regarding this rule. The first domino has already fallen with the Northwestern ruling, and only more are going to come. It has stopped being a question of whether NCAA athletes are going to start getting paid, but when. And that's my project.